let them cut their own, excuse the expression, gonies off. Basically, that's what he's saying. He's making a play on cut there. And tell them, and also the fact that Essenes and others cut people off in terms of excommunicating. So it's a double play. Tell them I would they would themselves cut off. So he's aware, and now you're saying, oh, no, that's not our point. Yeah, it is our point. It is. He's a really tough character, and he can be quite devastating. And if you don't agree with him, quite unpleasant. If you agree with him, well, he's wonderful. Well, anyway, going back to Eusebius. The question is, where did Jesus stand on all these issues? You say, oh, well, we know. The scripture says he did this, and the apostles and the disciples and everyone else misunderstood it. That's constantly the approach of the gospels. Disciples came to him and don't understand him, and he rebukes them and so on, as he does the Pharisees and Sadducees, and nobody understands him except Roman centurions, poor Syrophoenician Canaanite women whose faith have saved them, and a lot of other simple, small people who understand him better than Jesus' own followers. And at one point Jesus says, one sinner is worth 99 righteous ones in the wilderness. Well, the 99 righteous ones in the wilderness are what the Dead Sea Scroll people call themselves righteous ones. They're in the wilderness and they're studying all the time to make themselves righteous. So we're getting a text basically on behalf of the Pauline Gentile mission to save the sinners or the people outside of this world. And a lot of these passages are directed to conciliate them. Now the question, so that's not Jesus? I don't know. And I'll give you one indication why it may not be. In the book of Acts, which we're going to study, Peter, now our principal leader at this point before James takes over, goes down to Jaffa on a rooftop. And he's standing on the rooftop looking out. In the meantime, the narrator of the book of Acts tells you that a Roman centurion is in Caesarea, which is where the Roman capital is, and he's sending his servant to ask, and this Roman centurion loves Jews and is known to the whole Jewish nation for all his good works, and is a very, very pious person, and is spoken of very highly by the whole Jewish nation, which I'm sure is total rubbish. There was no Roman centurion that was spoken of highly by the whole Jewish nation at this time, because particularly the Caesarean detachment, Josephus tells you, were the most brutal and violent of all, and they provoked through their violence and brutality the war against Rome. And so brutal and violent were they that after the war, even the Emperor Vespasian felt the obligation to banish them from Palestine because they were so hated by the people. Now, you have to decide which is an accurate portrayal. But whatever the point being, the point being is to get Peter to visit the centurion's house. That's what the whole thing is about. To visit the centurion's house, he has to be willing to enter not only a non-Jewish house, but one who wasn't keeping the law and who may not have been keeping any of the things of bodily purity that the law required, which are very onerous. So, Peter is on a rooftop, and before this servant gets to him, a voice cries out to him from heaven. I've told you about this episode before. It's the key episode in the book of Acts. It Paulinizes Peter. And what happens is, a voice cries out to Peter, and a tablecloth is unfurled from heaven and comes down. This is not obviously a very historical episode, except in people's visionary mindset. So on this table are all the forbidden food of the Jews on this cloth. And the voice cries out from heaven, "Eat, Peter, eat." Just like Peter denies Christ 3 times on his death night, Peter is pictured here as 3 times refusing to do so. How many are familiar with this episode? He says, "No, I have never eaten any unclean thing." Or anything, whatever, however it puts it. Finally, when the voice cries out the 3rd time, Peter says, "Okay, I have now learned not to call anything unclean or any man profane, not to make distinctions between holy and profane." Well, that's the whole point of Paul in his letters. But the Peter we meet in Galatians hasn't got that vision yet. So now if Jesus taught this, how come even in Acts' view, his closest associate, Peter and successor, doesn't know the issue, doesn't know the resolution? How come he doesn't know Jesus already resolved this point? So my conclusion is the struggle of Jesus did not resolve this point. And in fact, probably didn't teach at all what we think he taught on that issue, because otherwise Acts would not have felt required to give Peter, if you follow the logic, a pro-Pauline vision to resolve. In other words, if we take Acts at face value, then Peter does not know that he can keep company with either unclean, profane, or other people. You know, a religious Jew, even if he meets me, will not shake my hand, will not touch me, because I might have come in contact with a woman during her period, and therefore I will have incurred her pollution. In fact, I might have been sleeping with her during the period. She may not have been going to the religious mikveh to take and you say, well, this is all stupid stuff. I grant you it's stupid stuff. But the point is, these were the extreme purity regulations required by the law. So who would want to do that? Well, that's the whole point. In the Old Testament, why are these extreme regulations laid upon the Jews according to the pretense of the Old Testament? Why is it? Why are they laid upon them? They are supposed to be a chosen people, a people, now you can say they're chosen from misery, a chosen people set aside to be a people of priests. You see, these are the regulations that priests observe coming near in the old ancient temples of all religions. Even in Hinduism today, you have the same thing. The Brahmins have a special, purity situation. I'm sure the Magi in Persia did too. All priest classes serving a deity in those days had all these purity regulations. What the Hebrew Mosaic Bible did was put it on the whole people to be a people of priests to serve the nations. So that was imposed on them in order to be totally pure in them. Well, they're not, obviously, we know no one's totally pure, but they would admit that too. But that is what the problem is. Now, Peter is in the old mindset, the old wineskins, as Jesus is portrayed as putting it. Paul is in the new mindset. That is someone who wants to live in cosmopolitan Rome and knows that to propagate these doctrines in a real way in cosmopolitan Rome, you're going to have to lighten the burden of this stuff. So Paul is, as he puts it in Corinthians, out to win. He's an evangelical who believes in winning. Now, some of you know Islam. Islam has picked up this stuff. But Islam has reimposed many of the Jewish legal regulations on strict Muslims. Not all of them, but some of them, including the kind of food that they will consume and some of the bodily purity regulations when they go to prayer. It's called tahara in Islam. And so Islam has shown that, in fact, you can have these requirements on a whole population to some extent, and that's what Islam has done to some extent.